Ms. Becky, can you give us a roll call?
Sure. Councilmembers Perkins,
Here.
DeLucy,
Here.
Hobart.
Here.
The first item on the agenda is approval. Well, let me just mention who else is also here. Adam Norris, Brian Sidney, Mark Cemetery, Zach Walker, and Becky, of course. I don't know who caller one is. And Brad Hall. Ron, you're here.
You guys are caller one.
Yes, Karen, Brad's on.
Okay. Okay, the first item is approval of minutes from the September 25th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at them? Any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Not for me.
I don't see any, Madam Chairwoman.
They're okay with me, so I'll go ahead and accept them as approved. And now we do a Munich update. Ron, I thought we'd move you up to the top of the agenda so you can leave if you want to leave.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So the update. So we completed all of the stakeholders meetings just this week. I finished up, had a great conversation with Mark Perry about the history of the implementation of Munis. And right now I'm writing the report. So I think things are going quite well. I was actually, there's quite a bit that is going right with Munis. And so it was heartening to me to learn that. The report draft will be ready by mid-November, and then I'll deliver that. And if need be, I can build a presentation around that to deliver to the team my findings. And then after that, we need to, if everybody agrees, we need to execute on the plan, on the prioritized needs. That's where I'm at.
Okay, and it's a little out of order, but let's talk about the meeting dates for November.
Okay.
Because the fourth Friday is Thanksgiving. And so Brian and I were talking about this earlier. Brian, do you remember the date we thought we could accommodate your getting the operating reports out to us and also not mess around with the Thanksgiving holiday?
Yeah, so the fourth Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, which is a city holiday. So we think that we can get you the financial reports in time for this meeting on the week ahead, which is the 20th.
Okay.
Friday the 20th.
Let's everybody look for Friday the 20th, November 20th.
Okay.
I will say,
That looks fine to me.
you may only have 2 or 3 days to read the reports, but the reports will be out on the 15th.
Okay.
And then we'll send them out to you as soon as we can.
Ron, do you think it's possible for us to have your report in time to read it and discuss it then on November 20th?
I can have it ready on the 15th. So
Awesome.
does that work?
That would be great.
Okay.
All right. So we will expect Ron's report on the 15th, and we'll discuss it on November 20th at our audit and finance meeting. I assume we still want 1:30 in the afternoon. Everybody?
Yeah.
Mr. Perkins,
Sounds
is that
good.
okay?
Sounds good.
Hold on. So what day? Actually, I'm looking at the calendar. November 15th is a Sunday. So when do you want me to have that Monday work for you?
How about the 16th?
Okay. Very good.
And your report, Ron, will deal with the timeline, the costs are in the training, and then cost to date. You'll give us a breakdown, all that, or do you want to investigate and talk about these other two things also?
I'm not sure. I have to talk to Brian about the costs because I don't have any of that information. I do know what you did spend but it's going to be more of here's what we need to do and here's the timeline. But I can work with Brian on the costs.
Okay.
Councilmember, that's actually, we have the cost for this meeting if you want.
Oh, okay.
And then Cindy Gray, the CFO, has that presentation ready if you'd like.
I'd love it if that's okay. Ron, is there anything else you'd like to address with us at this point?
No, I think things are going well, and I'm pleased with the progress. So.
Okay, Then I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Kidney.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
And I'll subsequently then turn it over to Cindy Gray, who's the CFO for the city. And she doesn't have a printed out report for you, but she could just answer any questions, but just give you an overview of what the contract is with Munich, the ERP fund, and then just kind of giving you an update on what the amounts are. I think that was the question you had.
What's an ERP fund, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, we call it the ERP. It's our computer internal service fund where
To pay for it?
yeah, so it's an
Okay.
internal service fund. We purchase a lot of things within this fund, and then we charge back out of that fund
Okay,
to the department.
got it.
The primary expense in there is very specifically the Munis project.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Cindy.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So, worked up some, costs for the Munis, project. The Munis contract itself was, 4.9 million. And, to date, we have spent just under 2 million on that contract. So, that contract is for 7 years. And so we have, we've spent just under 2 million. We have incurred, which leaves us another 2.3 million yet on that contract. Most of those expenses are going to be for annual fees for the next 5 years.
I'm sorry, Cindy,
Excuse me?
I couldn't understand what you said. They're for something over the next 5 years?
Oh, the annual fee, we
Annual
still
fee.
have the annual fee for the next 5 years. And that pretty much makes up the rest of the contract, of which is about $2.3 million.
Okay,
And so, outside of the contract, we have incurred 1.5 million. And those expenses are for, the conversion costs, that we had to pay to convert the data from JDE into Munis, implementation, fees from like consultants, hardware fees, and direct employee costs, which are related to the project itself. That would be like the project manager, or any time that an employee spent direct time working on an Munis implementation. So to date, including the expenses outside of the contract, plus what we have paid towards the contract, we have spent $3.4 million, with
And
another
the money
2.3.
money that we spent for the outside the contract expenses, did that come from the general fund, or was that split up among the various funds? Where did that money come from?
That money will be split up. It's part of our internal fund. So those costs will be split up and divvied out to all the other different departments and funds.
And is it split just like equally, or, I'm just curious now. How do we determine that? Do you know?
No, we haven't really done the allocation as of yet. We're still working on that. So,
Okay. I'll be
but
curious
that
to
will
see
be.
that, Cindy.
Cindy, if you don't mind, I might,
Yep,
answer
step
this.
right in.
So up to this fiscal year, there was an equal amount, calculation that was done, that was set up, I think, from 2018 up to 2020. It was kind of split among 4 ways, 3 utilities in the general fund.
Okay,
What Cindy is alluding to is we've implemented and we've started a transparent, internal, calculation, cost allocation. So basically, in the future, starting this next fiscal year and into the future, we charge back to specific departments based on, their usage of the software, their need of the software, number of employees. So it's a really very specific calculation.
okay,
That really get the cost directly to where we think the cost should be. Instead of just we're just gonna split it by 4 and
Right.
split it out. So, we've got the allocation started, we're gonna wait until the beginning of the next fiscal year to actually start implementing this direct allocation
Okay,
for all of our internal service funds.
okay,
Kind
okay.
of it's a, I don't wanna jump ahead on this, but it's a big deal for us because it's a very transparent, project, so at any time, anyone can say, wait a minute, what are these administrative or these overhead costs to an operational department? To be able to pull up and see exactly the calculation that went into that.
Okay,
So that will start next fiscal year.
got it. Okay, thank you. So, Cindy, are you involved in the training? Are you training people? Are you getting trained or?
Yes, I'm very much involved in training and getting trained.
Ryan, do we have a project manager?
So we have, of course, Ron is our external project manager.
I know.
We've been having a little, debate going back and forth about the best way to, either fund or hire the right kind of person for that, internal project manager, whether or not we take someone off of the current duties and assign them to that. We've tried several, retired former finance directors, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, and then last minute they said, no, we don't want to do that. So we're having a little trouble place that. Cindy just shared with me earlier today that we do have a really good candidate who may be able to come in and help us out 20 hours a week or something like that. That would be.
I'm just remembering that was part of the contract with Tyler, that we would have a project manager.
That is part of the agreement that we had with if you look at the big agreement, there are certain things that the city was required to do. And quite honestly, there's a lot of those things that Ron's helping us get back up and going. So for instance, there was supposed to be a citywide committee, steering committee on the project. We're gonna get that up and going. I'm not sure if that ever was, but we're gonna get that up and going. But yeah, definitely the internal, project.
And that's the only reason I'm so concerned about it, because if we're having problems, then we need to talk to Tyler, about maybe modifying some things or maybe getting his credit back. I'd like us to walk in with clean hands and not have to defend our position for not following the rules.
We agree wholeheartedly. That was the exact discussion that we've had with Ron and Cindy and I about, there's some things that I'm not happy with the performance of Tyler and Munich. I'm not sure if it's a case where we go back and say, you didn't perform this way, but then you're exactly right. They can say, well, you didn't perform this way. So,
Right, okay.
yeah,
That's the only reason I'm worried about project manager. I have no complaints at all, Cindy, about your work. I know you're working your tail off, dear.
Yes, we are. We have been working long hours to keep things up and running, and so I appreciate that.
Anybody have any questions on this topic? Mr. Hobart shaking his head no.
No.
Mr. Perkins?
Mr. City Manager, so with the outside contract funding, that has already been budgeted in through our budget, so there's no unexpected pop-ups that we're looking at, correct?
Right, that's this fund that we're talking about, enterprise resource plan. So yeah, we have stocked money away in that fund, and we'll continue to replenish that as needed. But yes, as of now, we prepaid for this project.
Anything else, Mr. Perkins? Anything else, Mr. Kidney?
No.
Okay, financial and operating report. Mr. Kidney, September 2020.
Yeah, there are not a lot of changes from the last month, but I am available for questions. I can also share my desktop and go through several funds to give us an idea of where we are on things. I think I can share. Maybe I can't. Oh, I need to ask, Becky, can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Sure, give me just a second, please.
So hopefully you can see my screen.
D7 right now.
So I just want to remind people where you can find the financials, since I'm showing the starting there. It's in the finance department. It's easy to get to. You go to the department, finance reports, and then we have reports that we do after 2020. If you want to go to older reports, we have the tabs here. But the monthly reports are simply here. And we pull up September. And it just flashes right up. There it is. I think we've got a lot of people on the Wi-Fi here. It's taking a lot of load. So one area I definitely want to point out for all of you that we were asked to include this far right column called percent from budget. And kudos to that council member that suggested that. Mr. Hobart, I appreciate that. And what that calculates is, takes the column, so we're at 25% of the year, this first quarter of the report, and just basically does that math. So for instance, this top line is 28% minus 25%, and that's where you see that sales tax for this particular fund we're looking at is 3% higher. So it seems like pretty straightforward math, but honestly, when you're running through these reports and you want to just see things highlighted, that's a really good column to go to kind of see where you are quickly. You'll notice on the second line, you'll see this minus 25%. That's because as accountants, we have trouble with numbers, and we're always confused. We're always confused when we have a zero. We don't like to divide by zero, it's an error. And so our accountants said, well, why don't we just put in a minus 25% here to show that there's not any activity compared to budget on this line. We can change that if that's confusing, but you'll see that anytime you have zeros across here, you'll then see this minus 25. Other places will put an NA or just blanks. We thought we would try this method and see if that's too confusing for people. Just let us know, and we can adjust that.
And when percentage actual of the year is 50%, we're going to see a negative 50%, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Correct. So let me jump. I had skipped ahead. So let me start with the general fund here. So you'll see this first line item, taxes for the general fund. It appears that we're 5% variance from where we want to be on the budget. However, again, like I reminded the committee last month, that this taxes include sales and property taxes. Our property tax distribution does not come in until November. So all you're seeing here is the sales tax portion. So you won't, we're obviously behind then on our property tax allocation because we haven't received any yet for the fiscal year. So you'll see on the November reports that will kick right back up. And when I get to the individual sales tax funds, you'll see where the actual sales tax is coming in as a percentage. But in this case, this is combined. Again, like last week or last month, you'll see our charges for services and fines a little bit under. Again, that's a direct impact of COVID. On the expenditure side, you go down here, you'll see for the most part we're on track with budget. The ones that you'll see over, such as the finance department, I mentioned last month that we encumbered the full cost of some of the computer equipment already in the year, and so that was a pretty sizable expenditure for us, and so it kind of makes the whole year the budget impact a little bit skewed on that. But otherwise, I don't see any departments too materially over where we're not over concerned on the expenditure side of things.
And Brian, I would like to say thank you. I see that you've made the COVID reserve category versus just a general governmental tag. So, I appreciate that change. That makes it easier for me to keep it straight in my head.
And that was a great suggestion. And, I'll remind the group here that in the future, you'll see that amount, the amended amount change. If you remember, the first column here is the original budget. The second one is the amended budget. As, the city manager would see needs in other departments for COVID-related expenditures, we'll amend the reserve budget down, and then the subsequent department that gets allocated those dollars, which will come to council for approval, you'll see go up, but the net amount shouldn't change. So just hopefully, we won't need a lot of that, but, anything we wouldn't use then would then go into the fund balance at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Is there any specific questions about any of these funds? I know, we did send you the link, I think around the 15th or 16th of this month. There's not a lot of other major changes from the last month. I did mention about the sales tax. I just want to point out, for our sales tax fund, the first line there is sales tax. And so you'll see that we're 3% from where we were projected to be budgeted. Now, again, as a reminder, these budgets the original budgets were accounting for the COVID impact, because, you know, we were several months into the COVID pandemic when we set these budget amounts.
Right.
So they were very conservative when we did the budget impact, or did the budget projections for sales tax. But I'm glad to see the fact that we were a little bit more conservative than needed to be on that. But we'll watch this closely. The city manager, of course, sends a report out to the council each month that gives a good analysis of where we are on sales taxes.
And I'm no accountant, so I know some of my questions are gonna be real basic. I'm sorry. But like on the street improvement sales tax, page 2, I noticed that under expenditures, capital outlay had been in August 550,000, and now it's almost 8 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered, I don't remember approving capital projects. Would that have been something perhaps we approved 6 months ago, but we finally paid for it now? Or why is there that difference?
You're asking the right questions here. If you look at the original budget that says 4.9 million,
Right,
and then you'll see an amended budget of 24 million.
right,
However, you may not remember you amending the budget by that additional $20 million.
right,
Well, the way that we budget here in Independence is that those items that were budgeted in previous years for capital projects that have contracts against them are automatically rolled over into the next year's budget.
got it.
So you're exactly right. So the expense you're seeing there, that $4.8 million, very well could have occurred or been approved or authorized in a previous budget. And so
Okay.
what we're doing here, the way it's shown here, is we're increasing the budget amount based on what you allocated or budgeted for in prior years for those projects.
Okay.
Great question.
Okay, and I'm gonna like only take 7 minutes. I'm gonna talk really fast. Page 3, capital outlay. I noticed it went up like $800,000 from the original to the amended. And again, is that same answer? We could have approved something a long time ago?
It is, and I will say, I think we can make improvements on how we budget these and show these. I will be recommending as part of our next year's budget to actually have a capital project fund for each one of these operational funds. And
That would help.
And so, for instance, Park Improvement Sales Tax Fund, the idea then, you're only seeing the operational revenues and expenses on this page. And then you flip the page over and go, oh, here's the capital projects
Right,
that you've approved this year and you've approved in prior years, and here's the expenses to them.
and, yeah, and,
And unfortunately, we're just not, our reporting, we just haven't budgeted that way yet,
right,
but we'll,
yep, yep,
our plan is to have the budget set
okay,
up that way. And you'll see that not just for parks, but definitely for the utility fund also, because that is always a question on the utility fund. So that allows us to pull this capital out so that, governing body can look at the actual operations impact.
yeah, it will make it easier for me, because I compare the operating from August to September, and it's a question, and like I said, I'm no accountant, so I'll ask my questions, because I simply don't know. Page 7, we're talking animal shelter use tax, and I noticed intergovernmental revenue is a category, and then page 8, which is the police use tax, that category doesn't exist. So I don't know what intergovernmental revenue category is supposed to be.
Intergovernmental will be, like a grant or something.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
or a shared tax, but it'd be like a grant.
is there a reason the police use tax doesn't have the same category? I'm just curious, because they're both use taxes. That's all.
I think it's based on what they anticipate, in having in that fund.
Okay, so they give you the categories?
Those categories are what, I would imagine that these reports are set up with those categories in
All right,
them.
okay.
If you'd like,
I just was
imagine
curious.
by the end of your 7 minutes, I'll probably have a message pop up here that tells me what's going on there for my accountant.
Okay,
But,
cool.
we can clean that up. If we don't need the intergovernmental revenue, then we don't, we'll take that.
It was
we'll take
use
that
tax,
right out.
I don't know why it's there, that's all. Okay, and then on page 10, I don't understand what intergovernmental again is, and then charges for services. And that's park and recreation property tax. I don't understand that.
Well, so charges for services are gonna truly be program charges. So if you take a recreation class.
Oh, okay,
That's
yeah,
gonna show up there.
got it.
Again, intergovernmental is probably, I don't know the specifics on this fund, but it could be part of the meals program that they have, and that they have cost share from another agency that would help pay
Got
for
it.
that, and then that revenue is reported under intergovernmental. That's meaning another
Okay.
government is providing those revenues. That's what the intergovernmental revenue.
Okay. And then is the money that we were lucky enough to get from the state of Missouri, is that in the tourism fund on page 11, or is that not reported yet?
I don't believe that would be reported yet.
Okay,
And you'll probably also see a line item that says intergovernmental next year, or next month, when you see that revenue come in.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then on page 16, this is grants, and now I'm real lost. A category here is charges for services. And I don't know, do we have a granted department? I mean, I just don't know what charges for services grants would be. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
Yeah, I might ask Cindy if she's on the line, or if Nancy's on the line to speak up, on that specifically. But, you know, some of our grants,
That's not matching money, I mean, or is it?
no, it wouldn't, no, matching the expenditure side of ourselves is what we're matching the money with. Charges for services might be, if part of the grant is some kind of an operational grant where we also charge for, again, this is a combination of multiple grants. So there could be a program that we have that is grant funded.
Right,
We account for in here,
right,
in that it also has, an item where we're actually charging, users as part of that grant program.
it.
And that's, again, that's where that would show up for.
got it, okay. And then, I wanna understand much better workers' comp
Okay.
and risk management. I'm really, really, really nervous with a negative $8 million.
As we all are. Would you mind giving me that page number so the people can can see this on.
Yeah, page 23 is workers' comp, and page 24. And
Okay.
Brian, I mean, you and I met for coffee in anticipation of this meeting, and I had not yet had a chance to go through the September numbers. So is it possible for you to maybe put that on the burner to talk about in November?
I can, but
Because I feel like I'm catching you flat-footed, and I don't want to do that.
That's okay, I do know these numbers.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes, workers' compensation, is a major operation of the city, right? We're a self-funded workers' comp program. So we don't use a private insurance. It's just like our Stay-Well Health, where we fund ourselves for this, to cover our employees, any accidents or, injuries that are on the job. So in order to do that, we do turn around and we charge back, very similar like I was talking about on the computer fund. We charge back to each department based on their, exposure to workers' comp. And so that's where you'll see the charges for services.
So is it possible next month, maybe you could tell me how much is police, how much is fire, how much is all the different, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely, we can,
Awesome.
I am on the fly, I would be able to do that here real quick, but I'm afraid I'd probably be stumbling around, so, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to catch a question.
And I would ask Cindy if you could take that note for me too. So we'll provide the breakdown of what we charge each department. And then we have, it's just like, this fund, if you think of it, is very similar to a for-profit insurance company. So this fund is insuring the departments for workers' comp and also risk management, the other fund you're talking about. And so what we do is we charge the departments for their exposure, those revenues come in, and we hope that there's enough in there to cover any expenses for that year. But at the end of the year, we'll go, well, this department may have had more of exposure than we originally thought, or less exposure, and so we'll adjust the rate in the next year, either higher or lower based on their exposure.
Okay, so this is over the last fiscal year our rates are based, or do you do
Yes.
a broader, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for instance, going into the next fiscal year, we'll take what we think, what we think it will cost for each department next year. At the end of that year, we'll recast. We'll basically say, oh, we charged them this much, but we should have charged them a little bit more, or we overcharged them. And so we'll adjust the rates back to the department. Again, it's just like this fund is its own insurance company.
Does actual money get transferred back and forth?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, actually, yeah. So again, if you look at that charges for services, so far this year, we've charged the departments $900,000 for their coverage.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So then you'll see that we've actually incurred $970,000 in
Yeah.
actual expenditures. So within those costs, that $4.5 million are like actual cash claims. But then there's also, we have a reinsurance that we pay for. We pay for a TPA that manages it. That we also have a really good program with a nurse. There's an actual nurse that gets the initial phone calls and helps triage the issue.
Okay.
And so that's also paid for in that. So that's kind of the operational, the revenue and expenditure side. Now you go back and you look at $8.7 million. What that records is not just cash balance, but also what we've reserved for claims down the road. So for instance, if I'm walking out here and Adam slaps me and I fall down the stairs, I have a claim.
Right.
And initially it's like $1,000 claim, but yet, I messed up my back or something like that. The TPA then will go, you know what, this may cost us $100,000 down the road. So we're gonna reserve $100,000 back to pay for that in the future.
And where is that on here?
That's included in that $8.7 million. So
So it's not really a negative.
the cash is not negative. The cash plus what we think we're gonna have to pay down the road is negative. So, if I pulled up our annual financial report real quickly, then you can actually see that of that, $8.7 million, I believe about 8 million of that are what we call reserves, that we think, like, we have several large looming injuries that happen, in a city our size, 1,100 people, that we've reserved back a large amount of money.
Okay, so that's like asset in a bank. It's an account, like in my simple mind, it's an account, it's my rainy day fund. If everything goes to heck in a handbasket and your back is in fact $100,000, that account is there to pay that claim.
Yes, except the fact that it's a negative means it's an unfunded account. But we're still gonna report it to you to let you know that
Darn it.
at the end of the day, over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll probably be paying out $8.7 million. We're not paying that all out the same year.
Okay,
Hopefully.
do we have a plan?
Yes.
Can you tell us about the plan next month?
Yeah.
I would love to
Yeah.
hear.
I could do that, sure.
I really would appreciate it, if possible.
No, I would love to. I will say that the reserve used to be 4 million, but now it's 8 million, because we went back and recalculated based on what we really think it is. Not because there was more impact, but we felt that it was underreported in the past.
Okay.
So that's why you see such a large number. This is a very conservative number. So yeah, again, it's a big project. It's reviewed annually by the State of Missouri Workers' Comp Program. We have reinsurance on it for any large claims. We think we're in a good place with this fund. It's taken a lot of work to get to where we are right now over the last year. And yeah, I would love to present this to you. It's a good success story on what we're doing here.
And what's the difference between workers' comp and risk management?
Risk management is all of our liability costs. So we have a contract.
Like car insurance and stuff like that? Okay.
Car insurance is in there, property-ability, casualty, a hailstorm comes in. That's where those, and it works very similar to workers' comp, where we see the exposure from each department and we charge them back based on that exposure.
Okay, so it's not a four-way split automatically?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, these two funds are very specific to their specific exposure.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, we can show that as part of our budget process where we come up with those numbers.
Perfect. Okay, my 7 minutes is up, so I'm gonna stop talking. Mr. Hobart, do you have any questions?
No.
Mr. Perkins, do you have any questions?
I think I'm pretty good. I will be anxious to hear the next report on that, the workers' comp.
Okay, so anybody else? Okay, specific line item expense report. Mr. Kidney sent this to us by email, and of course, Karen used her Scotch tape and created her own spreadsheet because she is a dork. And everything looks great to me. Did anybody else have a chance to take a look at it?
Yeah, it looked pretty fluid.
Okay, next one, police report. Shall I turn it over to Mr. Walker or Mr. Perry? Okay.
I could, why don't I kick it off and then we can go from there.
Okay.
So this study this is not an audit. This is just a study that was requested by Mr. Walker, to look at what was going on with police recruitment and retention. So I went out and did a little fact finding and found a few of these facts out right now. That the current vacancy rate is about 3%, which is in line with what Lee Summit and Blue Springs is reporting. Although something I saw this week says that number might have changed that there's probably more vacancies now. Yeah, so that's, in August, early September, that was, 3% was the number. Demographically, our police department is wider and more male than the rest of Independence. Our staffing levels, our budgeted staffing levels are in line with other cities with populations of a similar size. Looking at national data from Bureau of Justice. And Lee Summit and Blue Springs are also kind of on a par with national averages.
Okay.
For there. So what I was trying to do is look and see if there was a bulge in the area, what kind of room was there in the county, in eastern Jackson County, for fluidity between those three departments. Everybody at that point was pretty well staffed up, so there didn't seem like there was going to be poaching or anything going on like that. Although I'm sure that the captain, the chief, can talk about that. I'm sure he'll have something to say about that. Looking at the number of applicants, they've steadily fallen since 2016, following a national trend as well, roughly in line with what happened over in St. Louis. The Ferguson event, yeah. And a lot of the departments across the nation are reporting people are just not as attracted to police work as they were. We've gone from 300 plus applications 4 or 5 years ago to less than 50 last November. The current retention rate for the police department in the first 5 years of service is 78.7%. I was not able to get a comparable number with other departments. So basically, we are keeping, over the first 5 years that we have officers employed, we keep 4 out of 5. We're not sure why those people are leaving.
Yeah, I saw that.
The exit data, the department is now, it got switched over to Mark, it got lumped into an anonymous survey, so we couldn't extract specific police data from it. And the chief has reinstituted that practice.
To actually have exit interviews?
Yes.
Great,
So,
great, okay.
because, again, when we're doing work like this, why are people leaving? Are they poaching? Are they going to a different department? They don't like working in suburb areas. They'd rather work in urban areas, so they move over to Kansas City, things like that. And then there was an excellent study done by the Police Executive Research Forum that included surveys as well as conference notes and meeting notes that they had, that strategies for recruitment as well as some for retention were pretty well laid out and give us a good roadmap. And I'm interested to hear what the city manager and the chief think about that. But what I was suggesting is possible things to look at would be maybe adjusting salary schedules. There's a little bit of difference in terms of the impact of our pensions on actual net pay, where our officers pay 4%, just like the rest of city employees, pay 4% into the retirement system, where Lee Summit and Blue Springs do not. So their net take-home pay is 4% higher, if you will. So just looking at, they don't have to put any money into it. I'm not sure what their net benefit is on the back end. So hopefully we have a richer program that in 30 years makes a difference to them. What difference does that make to a 20-something? So that's kind of the issue that I would pursue there. Also, the further civilianizing more of the positions. Looking to maybe look at more crime analysts instead of more police officers. This week, Lee Summit hired I forget the title of it, but it's like a community health, a social worker,
Correct.
somebody to liaison, to do some of the other work. We've talked a lot in this city about the homeless population, and, do we need to use police to deal with those situations? Is there somebody else that could be trained up and work within the department or somehow? So looking into other alternatives that we might not need officers to respond to in terms of our policing needs. And so,
Well, Lee Summit, that's a pilot program, I think. So we're gonna know by the end of the year how successful it is, and maybe if it's successful, we can go ahead and steal that idea.
worth discussing. And
Worth
looking.
discussing, yeah.
So that's the overview, and be happy to chime in as we move forward.
Mark, the strategies to consider, you were just talking about that one report, and I didn't really understand the graph you showed us. Like, there's that offer incentive, and it's a darker line, and then a new incentive within the last 10 years is a lighter line. Is this independent? I mean, I don't understand how to read this graph.
Those came out of that police executive forum. So these were those dark lines. In the last 5 years, what some departments have been doing are things like relaxing standards, revising tattoo policies,
Okay.
reducing education requirements. So that's, as they're trying to deal with the Ferguson effect, those are some things that they are looking to do. And obviously would be things that I imagine that our chief has done as well.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
So I guess my question would be, after looking at this chart, what have we considered to mold that into what we need as a department, as a community, to kind of incentivize our new recruits or new hires to bring in? Have we taken this and assimilated into what we're looking at and be more competitive with the metro?
That sounds like a nice segue into Mr. Halsey.
Yes.
Are you on there?
Well,
Yes,
Chief, before you answer that, I also want to throw in too, because it's not on the list, at least I don't see it, is, facilities. We got a kind of an older facility over there. So as a new recruit, 20, 25 coming in or want to do something new and different, you see something old and antiquated as compared to like Kansas City, their North Patrol, South Patrol, Lee Summit, and their new facilities. I mean, I can't help it. That might put a negative spin, or not, at least a good positive spin on coming here without a newer facility to work from. I mean, am I speaking out of turn on that?
No, first of all, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
We can. Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, where do I start here? Let me answer those two questions first. It used to be that Independence was a place that was sought after for officers to come from other departments outside of Kansas City because of our activity level, the different specialized units that we have. I will tell you that's changed because the younger generation, and I'm not speaking bad of that, it's just reality, they can go to a different police department with a new police station, not near as many calls. And that's something I wanted to point out, that Lee Summit and Blue Springs, when we talk about pay, we've all talked about this, that our workload is night and day difference between those two communities. So that is an issue. So yeah, I think in the last probably 3 to 5 years, it's become evident that is it's a consideration. I know, we've talked about it. It's a lot of money. But our building is getting very old. We had a major issue yesterday with that we're still dealing with today. But so to answer your question, Mr. Perkins, that is, I think, sometimes a deciding factor for certain people. And what was your first question?
Can you, I don't know, if you're looking at Mark Perry's memo to, Mr. Walker and the council, but on page 4, there's this draft, and it talks about, I don't know, maybe 12 different categories of incentives. And I
Yes.
Can you tell me, what does Independence do and what do we not do? Because I don't even know.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
salary during, academy training?
Yeah, so I'll go through this real quick. Yeah, a lot of these we've either have been doing for some time or we recently have changed our policy. But we're one of the few departments, well, I shouldn't say few departments because more are doing it nowadays, but we will hire somebody and send them through the academy. They get a salary. Once they graduate from the academy, they go through the field training program. So that's something we've been doing for quite a few years.
Okay.
A few of the recent changes that we've made recently, every year we used to do the beard fundraising program during October, November, December, January, and we'd use that money to give to different organizations, non-for-profit. But since then, we have changed policy to allow beards. There's obviously, you can't just grow a mountain beard. You have to be in compliance with policy. And also the other thing, the bigger change that I recently made was the visible tattoos. For a long time, that was, asked of me, why can't we change that policy? And what I would always ask back to the boots on the ground is, show me data that shows that actually makes a difference on hiring people. Well, there's nothing out there that we ever found, but recently we had 5 female recruits that came through the testing process that were very good applicants. 4, if not 5 of them were military. Some of them are still active in the National Guard, and they had sleeve tattoos on their arm. So for me, that was kind of the trigger to say, okay, I've talked to enough community members that I truly don't believe that makes a difference to our community as far as beards and tattoos, as long as there's nothing offensive. So we have changed that policy. I just sent an email out. It was either earlier this week or last week, advising officially that policy has changed. So with the younger generation and even the older generation, quite frankly, and military people, tattoos are they're a big thing. And I will tell you, I'm kind of an old school guy. I don't have tattoos, but I realize myself that we do need to make some changes and thinking about the future of the police department and trying to get good qualified applicants. So that's why those changes were made.
And Chief, a few years ago, you and I had a conversation, and because I couldn't understand, I think someone complained to me that because they had a marijuana conviction, which was really a municipal court thing, it was no big thing, that might have actually precluded them from being hired by the police department. And I'm thinking it was you and I who had that conversation. Have we changed that? Have we loosened those type of restrictions, or have we not?
Yes, we have. So since I took the job, we reduced, first step we did was reduce the marijuana usage from 5 years to 3 years. But I will tell you here again, very recently, we are looking at changing, we have changed certain things in that policy to where, the chief, he or she should always have that discretion. There was an article that we all read. It was a military, I think it was a male officer from the military, that when he got out, he had used one time. Well, that precluded him. And I think that, we have to look at each individual. You guys have always heard me say, we're not going to lower our standards to where it's going to be a detriment to the community, but we look for people that are, have good moral ethics and going to treat people good. And if they do have some drug usage, we are looking at that policy to have more flexibility instead of just saying automatically. Now, there's certain things that automatically will prevent you from coming to us. And I think you guys should have that information I sent to you in that recruitment manual. It kind of spells that.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, so to give you a straight answer, yes, we have. But again, I think it's a very fine line that we have to be I don't want to be like other larger departments that allow people that have felony convictions, drug, sales, recent drug sales to become officers in our community. I don't think I would rather go with 20 vacancies than not having the right people. So, but we do need to continue to look at that to make sure that we're being realistic on those expectations as well.
Chief, this is Dan Hobart. Switching gears a little bit, the blinding white spot in Mr. Tillman Perry's report is that most of our officers are white. In our community, is the makeup and demographics of our community aren't really reflected in our police force very well. I know you're aware of this. It's important for me to try and change that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any ideas for what you're going to do going forward, or to try to get some more homegrown folks in the doors over there with you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So a couple different things that I'll speak about that is, one thing that I am proud of, we have more female officers now in our department than in my 28 years of being at the Independence Police Department. However, we had probably 4 outstanding officers that were African American that retired about the same time. We still have one of those that's a reserve now. He's still very active in the community as far as mentoring. I had a long discussion with him yesterday and about this very issue. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I mean, that's what I do continually is I ask community members and people that, I've built relationships with over the years of how do we attract more minority candidates into the police department. And to be very straightforward and honest, they said there's not a lot we can do right now because of everything going on, the national news, but with that being said, I disagree with that. We have hired several young men and women from the Fort Osage Criminal Justice Program. We have 1 in detention, 3 in dispatch. That is my goal. And I've always said that is what gives me the greatest pleasure is hiring local young men and women to stay in this community. The Independence School District has a criminal justice program as well. We work with them. I have spoken to several people that are not of age to be an officer yet, but they are working in Kansas City as a civilian position that we're trying to get to apply over here, that they have great interest in doing that. So I think the 5-year plan, quite frankly, is this. We've got to do a better job of mentoring these younger people when they're out of high school, and if they go to college or don't go to college, the decisions they make then could impact them on getting a job as an officer. And I'm sorry to get long-winded on this, but I'm very passionate about this, but we have got to do a better job of mentoring them. Me and Mark Randall have talked at length about a cadet program. The Boy Scouts are willing to take over and help us with a police explorer program, but those are going to be the younger kids. But the cadet program, the biggest thing that we have to do is have the ability to have somebody that oversees that, and they do full-time recruitment and mentoring in a cadet program. We don't have the personnel to do that now. But one of the thoughts that I have, that others have too, is, from the Prop P money, do we do a pilot program and take 1 or 2 officers and have them do just that? because until we do that, the more community outreach we can do and the building these relationships, that's what it's going to take. You know, I'm active with the Boys and Girls Club. I sit on the board. I have a community relations committee. We talk about this. We're going to continue to talk about it. But it's similar to the homeless problem that we have. It's $1 million answer that nobody has right now, but we're not going to give up on it. If that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I love to hear, and I know it's important to you. And you know, there's been a huge change in policing, especially with kids since you became an officer. Obviously, we have Columbine, we have school shootings, we have, you know, the nature of the business has changed. We have police officers in every school or most schools. That didn't used to, you know, the only officer in schools was Al Rudd. So, you know, not to mention the national climate right now, which, by the way, I want to say, you know, a shout out and kudos to the officers in this town that have, we've skipped a lot of the turmoil that a lot of places in this country have had because of the interaction and relationships that our officers have with the folks in this town. And I think that's pretty meaningful. But I think, like you said, it could help us skip some of the issues in recruiting too, because that relationship is crucial to getting folks to want to come work here, you know. I don't know, you know, we got an awful lot of loggers, retired officers. I know right where one is right now and what he's doing, but you know, and I know you talk to Gary George all the time, but maybe you could draw those folks in until we get full pay positions or until we get, you know, some of that. I'd encourage you to I'll bet you he'd be willing to help out if start a program or part-time thing or something with you. If you know, I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and Chief, I remember
Yeah,
back in 1980, a group of us wanted to have a youth court. And so we just sort of sat around talking about it. And at that point, just a bunch of community people came together and said, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's run with it. And here we are, all these years, 40 years later, we are a nationally known youth court operating within the city of Independence. And that took a lot of cooperation and coordination between the court system and the school system. And it was done within a year. So I would certainly encourage that. I think that cadet system sounds wonderful. And I happen to know that a bunch of retired police officers would volunteer their time, at least to start getting it off the ground. We might not have, you know, money for staff right now, but we can certainly start talking about it, and that youth money, Prop P money rather, is available. And if I remember right, we're over and above where we thought we'd be with the Prop P money right now. That would be a uniform position.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mr. Hobart, I want to go back to what you said and take an opportunity, because I've always said that about this community. We are so fortunate to live in a community that supports, and we are so fortunate to have men and women out there every day making positive contacts with the community that, quite honestly, you know, you don't hear about a lot of them because they're not going to tell you. They just do it. So we are very fortunate, and I think that we are way ahead of a lot of other communities because of that reason, because we have such a great workforce, not just the men and women in uniform, but I can tell you story after story about the civilians that step up and help people all the time, you know, and you only find out about it just by chance because they don't want to share that with you. So I appreciate that comment, and I totally agree with you.
Chief, just to drill down just a little bit deeper on the recruitment, I had a meeting before this one with some of the Fairmont folks and JD for the EDC. And part of that conversation was our Hispanic community is growing a lot, and having that language barrier there and only having two officers that can speak Spanish. So part of the discussion was, well, how do we get some of those members of the community, by whatever means, involved in law enforcement and have them stay here in Independence and to be able to work with and help with that language cultural barrier for Independence. I mean, that's becoming a more and more of a concern on the northwest side of town for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I would even say, as you all know, not even the northwest part of town, but 35th and Nolan, I know the neighborhoods to the east there, a lot of families live there. You know, and I think that's part of what we need to talk about. You know, we do have several that are fluent. We have several officers that, you know, can speak well enough that they can communicate. However, I think that that's something that we haven't talked about as far as, you know, incentivizing their officers that we have now. We do have a policy on it, but I think that we can look at that and maybe make that better, because I will tell you, they get used a lot. Officer Virgil, I know, gets, you know, on his days off, he's constantly, you know, helping with cases and things like that. But I think that goes back to what we talked about with the younger generation of getting more in contact with them now, maybe through the cadet program. You know, Van Horn's got a phenomenal ROTC program, and engage in those type of young men and women that if they decide not to go to the military, you know, we try to give them a job and give them some money, and then get them prepared for testing for a police officer at age of 20 and a half. And then we send them to the academy.
Yeah.
Is it possible date for some courses, education courses in Spanish? I mean, do we have any kind of program set up? I mean, my daughter knows how to speak Spanish, but I sure don't. But if I could take some classes and I could see that it would be valuable to me in terms of my career advancement within the police department, I might just do it. And I just don't know if that's possible. I have no idea.
Well, I know I can speak for one Spanish teacher down at Truman. She's phenomenal. And matter of fact, I just had a different conversation with the local businessman, Corey Thompson, that's looking for a translator for his business. And we had talked about it. I referred him to her to look at maybe a young man or woman that's getting out of high school that doesn't want to go to college or what have you. But it's those kind of contacts that I think that we have to continually explore and try to reach out to, to add, I guess, improve relationships and opportunities for not just the younger generation, but even the older generation. So.
No, appreciate you coming, Chief, and
Very
putting
much.
all this together. It's a lot of info, and I appreciate Mr. Tillman Perry putting it together for us.
Absolutely. Okay. Any new business? Everybody's so quiet.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I can
It's because
say
I talk too much.
on the 9th of November, Mr. Kidney will be presenting the 5-year financial forecast at a city council study session. That will really be our formal kickoff to our fiscal year 21-22 budget process. So we'll sort of let the council know what we're seeing and what we're trying to anticipate, both in terms of development of that budget, but the 4 years that follow as well.
Terrific. And then in December, we're gonna have the first quarterly review of the IPL audit, correct? And I think we've already determined that, Mr. Luce's report's gonna come out on the 16th, and hopefully the financial reports will come out on November 16th, in order for us to have a meeting on the 20th. Did I do something wrong, Cliff?
We also spoke about this at our preliminary meeting yesterday.
You gotta speak up, I can't hear him.
I'm sorry. So, we would like to get an amendment to our investment policy coming up, and I'm wondering if this would be a good method to do that we could present to you, to this, committee, proposed changes to the investment committee investment policy before we took it to the full council.
I think that's very appropriate, yes. Those
So,
proposed
so we
changes,
can have that ready for you in November.
wonderful.
That's cool.
So we're looking at proposed changes to the investment policy next month, Mr. Lou's report next month, and then the workers' comp risk management, drill down a little bit better so we can see what we're doing with that for next month. Anything else?
You have your marching orders, Mr. Toma?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. If there's no further business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
You're done. Thank you all very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.